Hi, well, if you're familiar with our channel at qdatraining.com, you will know that we have a series of videos. Well, this will be the third. So most of the other videos are just tutorial how to do something in the software, but this is a little bit more. It's the practical application of a well-known methodology is what we're talking about today. Now, we have one already for two very widely used methods, reflexive thematic analysis and interpretive phenomenological analysis, that's IPA or RTA, as they're both often referred to as. But today we're going to do a third one for another one that's used, probably not quite as popular as the other two, but still very widely used. And there are some tools built into NVivo specifically for doing framework analysis, Ritchie and Spencer in 1994. So, like the other ones that we've done, we have modified the standard tutorial that comes shipped with NVivo, so you'll have a copy of this, no matter what version of NVivo you're doing, Windows or Mac, and you'll have the ability to modify it. We're also going to make the project file downloadable because there are some other resources within it that we're going to refer to during the session to do with the practical application of framework analysis. And they'll be accessible in the project file. The version we're using is version 15 for Windows. So you would have to have this or a higher version. It's the most up-to-date one at the moment to actually access and open the file. We'll also put an email address up at the end, and if anybody wants to have these resources or a link sent to download the resources minus the project file, and if say they're on an older version of NVivo, then we'll do that as well. But we will put a Windows and Mac version of the project file in the comments, for in the descriptor for downloading those files if you want. Okay, now in terms of Ritchie and Spencer in 1994 are two academics who that's their probably seminal piece about framework analysis, but they've written many other things over the years. They're two London-based academics who head up an organization called NatSem, and they were the ones who came up with the concept of framework analysis. Now, my first advice to you, if you're going to apply framework analysis, because we see this a lot with our own clients, is don't fall into the trap of reading somebody else writing about Ritchie and Spencer framework analysis. Because there are some papers out there that have been published that are not quite right in terms of the practical application, but they've been published. So sometimes people refer to them. And I think the confusion arises from the name, framework analysis. A framework suggests very often an a priori or pre-existing framework. Now, I know of one paper at least that kind of it would suggest to you that you develop a conceptual framework or a thematic framework from the literature, and then you code to that. That's not a correct interpretation of framework analysis. So read the authors if you want to understand it. This is an inductive process where you do develop a framework. Like most other methods, you end up with a set of themes and sub-themes, and you will take them back to literature and to a conceptual and theoretical framework. You can even code the literature. We have a webinar we did in terms of accelerate your literature review with NVivo and how to correctly set up a literature review with NVivo. We put those links into that memo as well. So you'll have all of that available if you want to have a look at it, because they are related issues. And sometimes people populate that. So they're separate tutorials. I'm not going to goof off about literature, but you can fully integrate literature with your final themes. And then, as you're writing your analytical memos, you can directly compare the findings from the primary data, the lived experience, the attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, the intangibles that you're coding for, with the tangibles like current literature, policy, current thinking on the document. And not only would you see in the code the relevant passages around a certain theme or concept, you'd also see a list of all the authors who've written about it separately and all the relevant passages. So if you want to have a look about how to do that, that's a separate video. You need to go and look at that. Now, I'm going to suggest, apart from reading Ritchie and Spencer, so from here on we're assuming that you understand the principles of framework analysis and that What you want to do now is apply it in NVivo. And I'm going to suggest one of the things we have in here in the project file is this paper. It's written by Marjorie Bonello, who used framework analysis in her PhD. And this is a paper she published just about how she brought transparency and coherence to a doctoral study. It's a case analysis reflecting the use of NVivo with a framework approach. So clearly you'll see a lot of NVivo screenshots in here as she describes her processes and the 5 stages of Ritchie and Spencer. There they are. And she also then gives you screenshots and practical application and explanations as to why something like an annotation could be important, or a memo. And there's our coding schemes and all of that. So that's the framework grid. That's the dedicated tool in NVivo, which we will be showing you during this video. So I would recommend you read that paper as well, because you'll see very clearly laid out what would be a good audit trail. Now, apart from that paper, we also have another webinar we did, another one called how to, conducting an audit trail in NVivo. And one of the big benefits of using NVivo is the ability to use it to have an audit trail, to be able to show your workings, because that gives, would you show the 5 stages of framework analysis or the 6 stages of reflexive thematic analysis, and you actually show evidence that you've done that, you can make 2 statements to the academy, to your reviewer, whoever's looking over your shoulder, in terms of if you're in the academic and publishing domain. 1, you did the work, you didn't just say you did it, here's the evidence. And 2, you did it in a manner consistent with the guidelines from some piece of literature, Ritchie and Spencer in this case. So that's another video you might want to go and look at if you think that's something you want to do. We also have an analytical strategy. This would be how, in a previous project we worked on, how we would have written up the practical application. Now, it would be quite similar to the paper, because obviously the paper is the application of it, but just that would be customized around a particular project, and it would show the stages and explanations. There's the table, and then you would have appendices to show you did all that. So there are 2 things. We may come back to some other ones as well. We would have a project journal, by the way. We would recommend this for all projects, regardless of the method, where we would log everything. I mean, you'll be amazed when you look back on your project journal, just how much project management you do, how much management you do generally, and all of the various, everything. I would record everything there, and I would have chronological dates. You can have date and timestamp entries in a memo in NVivo. And I would have everything in there, from meetings with supervisors, PIs, or the team, timelines, and my Gantt chart with the stages of framework analysis, and when I get to each of these, who to contact to get help in NVivo, everything to do with the project. You'll be amazed when you look back on that. It's another piece of rigor that you can add to your audit trail, which gives you credibility as a researcher. That just imposing that discipline on yourself, and also it brings, as if you get credibility as a researcher, then that by definition means you get trustworthiness and plausibility to the findings. Because if I'm your extern or your reviewer, I don't have your data. So as far as the findings are concerned, I have to take your word for it that the data says whatever you tell me it says. So the only way I can make a value judgment as to the veracity of this piece of research is by looking at your processes, not your outcomes. As an external reviewer myself, I wouldn't even read your findings if you hadn't convinced me in the methodology section, the data analysis section of your methodology chapter, that they were worth reading. So it's there you get your credibility. So these are some resources and that we would have in a real product. That's why I'm showing them to you. And you can refer to these if you want to. Now, the standard tutorial comes with a set of codes. What we've done for this project is we have split out, we've modified the standard tutorial to how you would apply framework analysis. Now, with framework analysis, there are 5 stages to the process. There's initial open coding or exploratory coding, then identifying a thematic framework, Then they refer to indexing, charting, and mapping and interpretation. So we'll walk you through what that would look like in a real project using NVivo, and then getting the benefits of that transparency and everything else in terms of an audit trail. I'm going to just close all these open items for now. So you would start off with your primary data, your interviews, whatever you have, focus groups, surveys, whatever you have, and you would do your initial open coding. So basically deconstructing the data from its original chronology to an initial set of non-hierarchical codes. Typically they're non-hierarchical. We're not having any hierarchical structure here because we're not arbitrarily deciding at the first pass of the data that something is more important than something else. We're literally deconstructing it. We will reconstruct it when it comes to identifying a thematic framework, and that framework will hopefully make sense to further the aims of the study and address the research questions and the aims of the study. Now, coding, just in case you haven't done it, we have a separate video, which again I'll put a link into coding, managing codes, and how to organize your data from codes to categories to themes. That would be the same in most methods, but just in case you need to refer to it if you're new to the whole process of coding. So I'm just going to open up Barbara here and just to demonstrate the process for coding. It is very straightforward. So I've got my document open, my interview in this case. I've got my initial codes here, and I can add new ones at any stage if I want to. So if this piece of text here belonged in, something to do with habitat, this is the environmental changes study that comes shipped with NVivo, then I would drag and drop it in there. I now have 44 references to habitat from 17 different interviews or documents. Regardless of whether they called it habitat or not, it's an interpretive aspect here. The person you're interviewing may not be aware that this is habitat they're talking about. They're describing some marsh, but nevertheless you can code. And if I wanted to make a new code, I could just either right click here, make a new code, or just drag that piece of text out here, make a new code, just call it test, and my content is now coded there. I've added a new code to the whole thing. I just sort these on the name so I can find it. Wasn't much what I was doing there. Sorry, I couldn't see it there. So there's my test code with one reference from one file. Now, that's the first phase, and obviously we can produce a codebook. We can show that we've done this work very easily by just export codebook. I can just go to phase 1 here when it comes to my audit trail, and I can do export codebook. That's going to pull it straight into phase 1. I can include the number of files and references if I want, so I can show my workings. I can show I did the work. That's what I did for phase 1 of framework analysis. There's my table, and you can see my codes. There's none of them indented because they're not, and I can have descriptors, and I can see how much data these different codes are drawing relative to each other. Phase 2 is called identifying a thematic framework. This is not a preordained framework of literature. It's simply a framework that I think, reconstructs these codes that I developed in the first stage into something that begins to make sense. So these codes here, for example, are all to do with the economy. So we've grouped them into a category called the economy. And we've aggregated the economy, which means it sucks up all the data from the codes below that we've grouped underneath it. That's a copy and paste job. So I copy the original code called fishing and aquaculture. That's in phase 1. Right click copy. You can just right click on a code and copy it. I go into the economy and paste it, and that would put it underneath economy. So I can develop these categories or higher level. I suppose basically with all these methods, it's codes, categories, themes. You're going from the descriptive to the interpretive to the abstract. And almost all methods have these 3 cycles of coding. They might name them slightly differently, but they all pretty much have them. So now we've done our categories, if you want to call them that, or we're identifying an initial theme. So we're saying there's a theme running through all these codes, and they've one central concept. It's about the economy. So it doesn't take very long. I'm just moving things around. Some of them may be standalone categories. They don't have child codes yet, but we have gathered a lot of stuff around community change, it doesn't sit naturally under any of those other categories, so we're just leaving it as a standalone category for now. Now, indexing would involve, it's sometimes referred to as coding on. So I have a code here under economy called fishing and aquaculture. And underneath that, I have realized that a lot of the stuff in here is about the decline of the fishing industry. But they're saying different things. They're not all having the same experience or attitude, belief, behavior that I'm looking at. So I'm splitting it out by the different perspectives or voices because I want to represent everybody in the group. So these are the different reasons people think, and they're not necessarily in agreement with each other about why the industry is in decline. So I've got a more hierarchical structure now, more organized, very easy to see where things are or where they aren't. And that's phase 3. Now, then we come to phase 4, which is referred to as charting. And this is where this tool that's built into NVivo, developed by Ritchie and Spencer originally for NatSen, and then eventually they decided that the matrices in NVivo were probably more globally used. It's a matrix. So they gave the source code to NVivo, and now they've inculcated that into the standard software for anyone doing framework analysis. And it's called the Framework Matrix, and it's essentially a data reduction strategy. So I'm going to show you how it works with our phase 3 codes. I might just take a sample of them just to show you how it would work. So I'm going to make a new framework matrix here. We have a separate video on the how-to clicks for doing this as well. And I'm just going to call it, just call it indexing, just for now. Now, again, a matrix, it's made up of rows and columns. And we're going to put the cases, so it's like for doing an in-case and cross-case analysis. We're going to put the cases in here, and we get it to list any key demographics or quantitative information associated with the cases. Now, again, this isn't a how-to video. We have how-to videos for all of these things. It would be a one-day program otherwise. So we're assuming in this video that you understand cases and classifications. We do have a video on understanding cases and classifications, so if you want to look that up, but you would, we're assuming for today that you understand that concept. We just make the video too long if to explain all these things in one video. So I'm going to select my cases. So I have cases set up here. I have more than one set of cases. I have cases for people, and I have cases for the interviews. So I'm going to just put a few of my interviews. I'm not going to put them all in just so this will run reasonably quickly, but obviously I could put them all in. So I'm putting in a few cases there. And I decide over here what kind of demographics I want to display when I'm looking at them. I'm interested when I look at a case, I might be interested in the gender, the age range, and the township and community from which they're from. And I might be interested if they do, if their income is tied to fishing or not. So I can put whatever demographics I want to display here. Sorry, I've got 5. I should have 4. If you put too many in, it just doesn't. You can't read it. So the 4 key ones I'm putting in. I can drill down on any of these cases and get the full profile if I want. So there's my matrix now. In the columns, I put my codes. So again, I'm going to select. Again, I won't select them all. We stuck with the economy earlier on. We'll just do with that. So I'll take the top level one, which is everything on the economy, but I'll also take agriculture, fishing and aquaculture, jobs, and cost of living and tourism. But I could put, again, much more in than that if I want to. And I say OK, and I get my grid. And it looks like this. Now, just to explain what you're looking at here, each row here is a case. It's a person. So that's Betty, and that's her profile, and that's Dorothy, and that's her profile. I can widen these columns if I want to see a bit more. And I can, sorry, just go back there. So I can widen the columns, and I can we'll have a look now what goes into those cells in a minute. What's going down here are these themes or sub-themes that I've developed up to this stage of the process. So I've got the economy, I've got agriculture, etc. And up in the framework matrix, there's an associated views tab up here. That allows me to see things in different ways in the matrix. What I'm looking at the moment, what I want to see in the matrix is the cell coding. So that means that when I click into the economy for Betty, I see over here on the right whatever Betty said about the economy. Now I can write a summary here. Or I can use AI to generate a summary. That's a whole other video, how to use AI in NVivo, because one of the things that those LLM models do, and this is only available in version 15, the AI Assist, but one of the things they do very well is write summaries. Now, up to now, that's been a problem because obviously you could put your literature into ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or whatever you want, any of these large language models. And it would generate things like summaries, and it can even do descriptive coding. It couldn't do it with your primary data until version 15 of NVivo came along, which now has an in-app AI assist, which means that I suppose this distinguishes it in two ways from doing it in the likes of ChatGPT. It doesn't instruct the model, so the model learns nothing from your data, and it doesn't leave any data on the server, which means you can use this quite ethically on primary data. And the two things it does well, it can write summaries and it can do descriptive coding. So there's another video on that if you want to, and very useful for anyone doing a literature review or working with larger document sets like policy, literature, or even surveys. So writing a summary here, and every time I click into a cell, I'll see if there's anything there for Betty. She didn't talk about agriculture, she did talk about the economy. So I go in for Dorothy, and Dorothy was much more vocal about the economy, and there's everything for her. Now, obviously I can write summaries, or I can actually put this text into the cells. I'm going to hit the auto summarize button up here. And now I'm looking at, Betty's comment here. I can still write into this. I can still write my summary, or I can get AI to write a summary, but I've got the actual text as well. Common thing we would get from people running standard matrices in NVivo is how can I get the text into the cells? I can see the number of references. They can drill down into it, but they can't necessarily see text. But you can with this. There are a few other views I can have as well, and there's other layouts I can have. Show me the text on the right, or don't show it to me. Hide the text on the right. So now I've just got the grid because I've already got the text in the cells. Now they call that auto summarize. It isn't actually a summary; it's actually the text. But the AI tools can write actual summaries, or I can write them if I want to use a more interpretive writing style. These are sometimes referred to as master memos as well in various methods. But the idea is a data reduction strategy. That instead of having a lot of content about Betty for each of her themes, I have a much more concise summary of what she said. So reading this across, I can do an in-case analysis on Betty. Reading it down, I can do a cross-case analysis on the economy and see what everyone said. I can, if I want to, export this straight into Excel. I could even add columns at the end and write summaries of my summaries. And there's some evidence. There's a clear example that I can use in my audit trail to show I did actually apply the grid. I did what it says on the tin. I did actually code and follow the guidelines from Ritchie and Spencer. You can also transpose it if I want to see it that way. So there's Betty, and I can read her case all the way down instead of reading it across. And And that's the framework grid. And you can make things like see also links to the text in the original transcripts and all that if you want to. So it works the same, pretty much the same as it would from a code. I can have annotations, I can have see also links and all of that. And if I've already got annotations on that text, they will turn up in the cell as well. So that's indexing, and that's what that would look like. Or, sorry, that's charting, and that's what that would look like in NVivo. So the indexing was the coding on. The charting then would be this grid. Mapping and interpretation is simply analysis and write-up. So all the standard tools in NVivo, visualizations, coding queries, compound queries, matrices, crosstabs, they would all apply to the coding framework you have here now, summarized. And you can, they're all other videos. We have another 1-hour webinar we did for developers called Visualize Your Data with NVivo. And you're effectively writing analytical memos now against, I suppose it's very systematic and rigorous and transparent because, you know, I'm reducing data down to a number of statements which inculcate and encompass a total range of experiences across these different domains. And then I'm looking across the cases and looking at the extent to which that's reflected elsewhere. So all those other standard tools that you see in all the other videos would apply for phase 5, which is mapping and interpretation of the data. And that's essentially the steps that you would be following if you were doing framework analysis in NVivo. I've referred to quite a few resources there. I'll put them on our own website. I'll put them down below, and I'll write a summary of the video and everything else. But on the YouTube video, there won't be room for that. But I'm putting up an email address there now, which means if you ping me an email, we can either send you a link to the project file to download it if you want to, if you have version 14 or 15, and also these other resources that I mentioned at the start, which will be all up here, like the various visualizations and webinars that I mentioned, videos, but also the documents that were up here, which were, we showed you at the very beginning, the memos and journals. So the analytical strategy, how we would have written this up in a real report. And these are the framework releases. I actually have to add a couple to this before I put the link up. But this is the framework related resources, and there'll be all these things like the Audit Trail, managing codes and categories, the framework analysis itself, and the link to that paper. They'll all be in there in a memo, which you can also email me directly for those, or whatever it is you want, just let us know and we'll send them straight back to you. So I hope this was helpful for anyone embarking on the framework analysis journey. We've kept it as short as possible. It does wander with many of these how to apply a method into other domains. It's very hard not to do that. That's why I'm putting the links to the other resources. But hopefully it'll be of help. You can fast forward along and see which bits are of interest to you. Please like and subscribe if you think that was valuable. It does help a lot when people do that. And we'll see you at the next video somewhere up the road. Take care, everybody. Cheers.